Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and share. I'm going to share a window here. So if I end up at some point looking away from you all, it's because I'm looking at the chat that's over here to my right hand side. So hello and welcome everybody. My name is Mike Peck. I am as Kim had said, a co-founder of Ed3 DAO, and I'm also a full-time director of technology for a public school district located in Pennsylvania in the United States. So welcome to everyone, wherever you're joining from. A lot of familiar faces and names in the chat, so thank you all so much for coming out today. Hopefully you're able to walk away with some new information, some new actionable items, some tools to use, or new ideas. And so today's session is titled Streamlining Educator Workflows with AI. And in thinking about what to share today in terms of the topic at hand, I wanted to have a session today that could be approachable for educators, regardless of where you are in terms of your journey with AI. I wanted to be able to both share things that people who are just kind of getting introduced to this space can use or walk away with, as well as some things that hopefully people who've been using these tools for a little while can walk away with. So we're going to look both at how to use these LLMs effectively. LLMs are large language models, things like ChatGPT or Gemini. But also, strategies that can be used with those tools. So not just like the how to click, how to use sort of thing, but also, the sort of strategies and the values, that we can use to sort of use this technology in a way that's beneficial to enhancing educational outcomes. So with that in mind, we're going to get started today. So just a quick about me. As I mentioned already, I am a co-founder of Ed3 DAO, but also still full-time in a school. As a technology director, I do feel obligated to say that my previous responsibilities to that include working as a former classroom educator. So as a leader of technology in a school, I still like to place a lot of emphasis on professional development that focuses on the needs of educators and the students we have in our classes. If you wish to connect with me, you can see down just below there. I am probably most active on LinkedIn and Twitter, although increasingly less in the last couple of years, just due to working a couple jobs and now with a little young one of my own. Definitely times become a bit more difficult to come by, but you can always find me in those two places. So I'd love to connect with you after this as well. So as far as today's agenda goes, I do like starting out most of these sessions just because, again, I don't really, there isn't always a clear idea of, on the spectrum of where people are at in their AI journeys. But I do like to provide a bit of like foundational context for, the session going forward. And so with that, we're going to learn a little bit about AI and in particular how AI tools can best play a part in education. I'm going to talk about that through what I call a task-oriented approach to AI use. And in doing so, we can really maximize AI's impact through some effective strategies, including something called prompting. So we're going to look at how these can be used in order to really help streamline the work that most educators have on a regular basis. So let's jump in. So again, if you're in this space, if you've been using AI for a little while, this is probably redundant, but the next couple slides hopefully will sort of open us up into some newer spaces for conversation. And if at any time you do have questions or thoughts, feel free to drop them in the chat. I will be kind of paying attention to that as we go. So if you're new to generative AI, how does this stuff work? Well, it's pretty, and I'm oversimplifying here quite a bit, but the general flow is that there's a tool and the user inputs some kind of prompt. They give the AI model some kind of data. So if you're using Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude, you're going to put in some text. You're going to add maybe some PDFs, maybe even input some pictures. And that information is a part of what's called the prompt. That prompt, excuse me, I think I swallowed some fuzz. That prompt is then going to be used by the AI model. The AI model uses key terms from the prompt and scans the data that it has. And based on the data that the LLM, which is this AI model, has, it's going to look at your inputs and the data it has and give you what it thinks is the most related and relevant output. The AI model then uses that data gathered and predicts the answer that you want. So I think we want to be careful in sort of over humanizing AI models. They don't have really the ability to think. They do, however, have the ability to reason and predict, which is kind of like, if you've ever used something like Grammarly, or if you use something like Google email, Gmail. I think Microsoft Office does it too as well, though I'm not as familiar with 65. But when you start typing, it starts giving you the next few words that it thinks you want to say. So it's not actually thinking, it's just predicting what are the next words that you might want to offer. And so when we're working with generative AI models, it's important to know that they don't have necessarily the ability to quote unquote think, though they can reason if we do a good job of sort of leading them down the path of what we're looking for. So in order to make the most of AI models, what's really important is we understand what these AI models like ChatGPT, like Claude, like Gemini are really good at. And so I put an asterisk kind of on all of this information here, especially the first few slides I'm giving you, because what we're finding is that these tools are getting increasingly good across a broader spectrum of capabilities. And so, what is true today wasn't necessarily true 6 months ago, a year ago, and probably won't be true another 6 months on from now, or even a year on from now. And so, what I put together here is sort of a state of the union of AI at the moment. But it's important that we kind of keep tabs on and follow up with what's happening in this space, because these things will continue to get better and better at a wider variety of jobs. And so as of now, some of the tasks that AI models are best suited for include things where it's automated, processes that just repeat over and over and over again. You can think of things like, for example, logging into your phone is an example of AI. It uses facial recognition, and all it's looking for is your face in the camera. And as long as your face is looking at it, it unlocks. So it's just a repetitious process. AI models, I find, are pretty good at idea generation, especially if you're kind of like at the starting point for, say, a blog or a project and you're struggling for ideas. They can be very effective for just coming up with a lot of different ideas very quickly. And while they're not always useful, it gives you kind of a girth of information very quickly. And so they're very useful in this respect. Data analysis, especially if you're looking at lots of data, if you're having to analyze 10, 15, 20, 100 pages, AI can process data very quickly and analyze it, providing you things like summaries. It could even do things like spreadsheets, where it's looking at all kinds of numbers and give you really acute insights that might otherwise take you a long time. As I mentioned before, not just with automation, but we talked about the structured repetition. So a bit of a redundancy there, but in terms of the repetition goes, especially when you provide AI a lot of structure, it can do things well within that sort of like tight, confined set of tasks. And the last one here is basic content creation. And so while AI may struggle with some other things, it's able to produce some content very quickly. Like as we were getting on the call here, Kim was sharing a little bit about, how AI can produce like things for pictures, like whether it's the metadata, the alt text that goes with pictures, or captions for pictures. It can produce blog posts or other written pieces very quickly. It can produce images really fast. And, we can imagine that in the future, as these the products get better, that content creation will become easier and easier. Okay, so these are things that we know that AI is good at. What is it not good at? Well, when you start adding in multiple layers to things, when you start to increase complexity, so if we're looking at kind of lower right here, so things that require multiple step processes or reasoning beyond, just providing a straightforward, simple answer to a single problem, the more complex the problem is, the more AI struggles with it. Particularly, if you think about us as humans, like when we look at a situation, we might use all sorts of different types of inputs to arrive at a conclusion. We might use our sense of sight, smell, hearing, and even, language to process a situation, such as like, well, there's a fire in a house, right? We can use all of those senses as input data to make an assumption or to make a conclusion. AI struggles when it has to incorporate multiple types of sensory, especially in multi-step resolution. Without context, so AI needs lots of context to come up with really good solutions. Again, things that we might take for granted because we can use all kinds of senses to be able to produce a resolution. AI might need a little bit more input, especially when it comes to context, not just from like where the current situation is, but background on a situation in order to make an assumption or a conclusion. Creativity and open-ended problem solving. So like on the previous slide, I know there's a bit of like conflict here at least, but I think it's important to note that AI oftentimes isn't creating something totally new. It's creating something that's almost like a remix of what's been done before. You see these models without inputs or data, like for example, to make music, AI model is going to need music inputs, which in order to have music inputs, it needs current music that exists. And so in reality, a lot of times AI is taking something that already existed before and producing something new based on a mix of different data. And so I do mention that creativity piece just because there is a bit of, I would say, we need to be clear on what's happening when you use these tools. The other thing that they do oftentimes struggle with is open-ended problem solving. So if there's a situation where there isn't necessarily a correct answer, but maybe a variety of different answers, AI models can struggle if they don't have enough context. And the last thing they're not very good at is empathy. In particular, when it comes to sharing empathy amongst other people. Again, they're machines. They're not necessarily thinking in the same way that we are. And since all of us on this call are educators, presumably in some fashion, when we start to look at this whole list here, all of these things are really important jobs for teachers. And so, I think it's really important to emphasize that when we look at this list of what it is good at, these are things that are very automated. They rely very much on data inputs and data outputs, but they lack sort of the human inputs of creativity, problem solving, complexity, multi-step reasoning, empathy. And so one of the things I'll say here, and I'll reemphasize towards the end too, is that AI is not necessarily replacing teachers. It should be thought of as a tool to enhance teaching. I would agree, Claire. I don't think AI is poised to take over our jobs right now, that's for sure. And so in order to really maximize the use of these tools, there's things that we want to look at. And when we're inputting information into something like a ChatGPT or Gemini, we have to provide AI very clear boundaries for working. And so I listed a few different things that can help you hopefully use AI more effectively. Now, I know this term often uses prompt engineering. I think it's just providing clarity. We don't have to overbake the term. So when we're talking about prompting, things that help the AI include specificity, context, role playing. In other words, the more specific input I give the AI, the more that I tell the AI how I want it to behave. So if I'm in a case of talking with ChatGPT or having a conversation with it, I want to tell what I want that AI to, like, what role should that AI be playing? And the importance of that is that the way AI works is if you, for example, are creating, let's say, maybe let's say you're creating a plan for students or for a lesson, they're going to talk about character education, or they're, let's say, going to talk about, we'll say, college readiness resources. And so when you're talking about role playing, what kind of person might be providing or giving information on college and career readiness. It might be somebody who's like a counselor. It might be somebody who's a workforce employment specialist or expert. And the reality is when you actually use those specific roles, when you're creating a prompt, one of the benefits is that the AI is going to look at data specific to those roles and provide an answer that's more in alignment with something that a counselor might say. And so, the same would be true if I'm trying to come up with like a biology lesson. I might pick out a famous biologist and say, create a lesson plan as if you're such and such biologist, or create a project if you are a historian who's exploring, like, say, fossils from a certain period in time. So we want to be very specific about the role we want the AI to play. This column over here, just a few last items I would add to this list. Clear instructions, I think that kind of goes with specificity. When you're working with AI, it's really important to break down complex tasks or complex questions. The more we can break a solution into specific tasks, the more helpful the AI can be for us. So when we take a few minutes, not too long from now, maybe a couple minutes, we're going to jump into playing with some of these tools. One of the things I want to really underscore is I'm going to look at some specific areas in terms of like, what are some of the more common tasks that most educators might participate in during a given day? As a teacher, though, if you're teaching in a classroom, your tasks on a daily basis might be a little bit different. And so if we just say, create for me a curriculum unit on, let's say, cell structure, okay? So I've asked it to create an entire unit on cell structure. It's a very open-ended problem. It doesn't have very clear boundaries. There's a lot of different tasks that the AI has to complete during this process. And so the result that you're going to get is probably very vague, maybe not useful, maybe even incorrect in a lot of different ways. And so when we're thinking about how we use these tools, the most important part is to break down your work into simple tasks, like as many simple tasks as you can. And that can allow you to create better prompts that you use when you're working with the AI models. So to give some examples of like how I might use tasks in a classroom setting, and as far as these are just some examples I picked out based on the things that I think I see the most often in my classrooms. So and also just sort of thinking back to when I was a teacher, one of the things that I often struggled with was brainstorming. If you're teaching a lesson, particularly if you're trying to maybe change a lesson from one class to the next or from one day to the next, brainstorming was something that was always challenging, right? Because you either have to go through, websites and find new ideas. I have to go through my books and my other resources, maybe talk to another teacher. But brainstorming is something that's very time intensive. And so one of the things that I find most useful, even in my current role, is using AI to help brainstorm different ideas for things. And we'll talk about some examples of that as we have time to work. But when we're talking about brainstorming, it's a great way to kind of get started, almost like a launch pad. Another thing that I find pretty useful from a teaching context is content creation, particularly when it comes to whether it's like a reading, perhaps making pictures, even getting to the point now where we can make audio and video with these tools. Content creation is like a very specific task, one that most teachers have to perform during the course of a day. And it could take a lot of different forms, including we'll look at personalization in a little bit. Lesson planning, I also call like learning experiences. One of the things that drives me bonkers about AI is that we have a really powerful tool at our disposal. And the one thing that I want to try to emphasize throughout this as we're playing with AI is that we have an opportunity here to do a couple different things, or one of two things is the way I look at it. And I talk with my teachers about this often, and that is that AI is a tool that allows us to either do the things that we currently do, just do them faster. But I would guess that most students aren't excited about AI producing more worksheets for them or different types of worksheets or making the same quiz or test that we used to use faster. And I worry that in education, we're using this tool and kind of trying to fit it in the shoebox of traditional teaching and learning. And so when I say lesson plans, I don't want it to be a tool that we say, oh, great, now I don't have to make sub plans anymore. I want to look at it from the perspective of how do we use AI to enhance the learning experiences that we're creating in our classrooms. So rather than just giving out a worksheet as we did in the past, how might we take that worksheet and maybe create a new learning experience where students are no longer kind of exercising the same capabilities as AI is? How do we get students thinking more critically, more hands-on, more interpersonally? And last but not least, personalization. I think AI, going back to the content creation point, AI has the ability to help us do things very quickly and to differentiate very quickly. And so whether you're teaching a class of 5 or 25, AI is going to give us the possibility to create differentiated experiences, whether it's differentiating the reading based on the readiness level, or possibly creating a whole new set of assignments or even evaluation tools based on the specific needs of my class, my students, or a group of my students. And so when we're thinking about the tasks that we perform on a regular basis, these are 4 buckets that I picked out. And so I don't want to limit it to this. I just picked these 4 as examples. Certainly in your classroom, you may have other tasks that are mind-numbing things that you do every single day. And so I emphasize for you to think about, what is it that I do on a regular basis? What are the tasks that I do that can be automated, that can be sort of used or broken down to very simple parts that AI can use to help me figure out how to do those things better. PhD level fax machine. Love that. So, all right, I'd like to jump into some play here. And at this point, I'm going to ask you all if you could grab your own LLM. So if you want to grab your own AI tool, I'm going to work with ChatGPT. It's the one that I'm most familiar, most comfortable with, I think. Probably the better way to say it. But if you prefer to use something like Google Gemini, if you want to use Claude, whichever one you want to use, or if you just prefer to watch, that's totally fine too. But I want to demonstrate how we can use some of these tools as we are thinking about how do we streamline teacher workflows. And so I'm going to break out of this tab. I'm going to go over to ChatGPT. So I have a blank one ready to go. And I'm going to go ahead and drop a link here into the chat. And you're more than welcome to use this document, remix it, share it, whatever you'd like. This Google Doc I put together is going to have a number of different resources in it for you. And so what I tried to do was thinking about those kind of 4 major categories. So brainstorming, content creation, we talked about learning experiences or lesson planning, and personalization. What I did is I broke out those 4 categories, and you'll see them posted in the document here. Just as like a quick show, I'll bring it over to this side so you can see it more clearly. So just so that you can see, make sure, all right, perfect. You can see everything here. On the left-hand side, there is a little, so I tried to use the headings. And so you'll see, if you click on that little bump out there, all the different headings so you can kind of quick jump between parts of this document. What I did is I created a section for each: brainstorming, lesson planning, content creation, personalization. And I put in there some tips that you can use for working with AI, like I said, to break down things into tasks and use AI more effectively. I even included some sample prompts, some things that are going to really adhere to the guidelines I was talking about before, which include how do we get AI to give us the best result? Like, how do we prompt it effectively to get a resolution that works best for us? And so, as far as like, we'll start with brainstorming. Brainstorming can be something that's very like personal to your own tasks. Awesome. Okay. Oh, good. I was just checking the chat. So yeah. So as far as brainstorming goes, there's all kinds of different sample prompts down below. But one of the things that when I'm thinking about creating these learning experiences, how do we encourage collaboration? In particular, when we're brainstorming something like a lesson plan or an experience for students, like how do we encourage collaboration? And when I talk to the AI, I want to be very explicit about that. Ask for dynamic, multisensory activities. Think about different learning approaches, different types of learners, and then really want to focus on creativity. So this is kind of subjective. I'm a bit biased, but one of the things I think is really important is as we're creating learning experiences, most teachers are going to have reference material of like a textbook or a set of worksheets that you may have used in the past or were given to you. You might have standardized assignments that require you to cover certain content. And so this sort of stands in the way of that. It sort of like confronts that a little bit. And while you may have certain responsibilities to the curriculum to ensure that you're doing certain tests or certain quizzes, one of the things that I find really useful is that AI can help me sort of take what exists and what I have and help me sort of synthesize or create something new based on something that already exists. So just as an example, I'm going to hop over to ChatGPT, and let's say, for example, I have a lesson plan that already exists. So I'm going to put in, let's say, actually, I have a test. So we're going to with, how about we go with Mayan history test and PDF. So I'm going to pull up a random PDF. Let's see. We'll see if I can find one. Okay, I don't have a PDF handy. Or maybe I do. Let me see. I think I might have had one from when I taught 7th grade history. So let's see. Mayan. Nope. I guess I don't. I don't know. Yeah, some worksheets. Nope. I thought I had one. All right, my mistake. So we're gonna pull. I'm just gonna say a website. So let's say I have a great website that. Oh, here's a test for us. We're gonna use this information right here. So let's say I have this website. And I had in the past students go review this website, and that was the extent of the activity. So they had to read the website and maybe share with others what it is that they found from there. Now, I might take a PDF of like a quiz or a test, and I'm going to dump it into ChatGPT. And so now I have this text or a document of some sort. Okay, so right now it's just giving us a revision of what was said here. So just summarizing all this stuff. Okay, great. So as we talked about before, one of the things that I find this really useful is I want to create some kind of like hands-on learning activity with this. So I'm going to say, great. Can you offer 3 types of assignments that are project-based learning in nature and focus on this content? Let's see what it does. So I take something that existed kind of in very bland form. It was just a website, bunch of text, bunch of data. Like I said, it could be a test or a quiz. And here it gives us a few different examples of projects. So now I have a Maya Daily Life project, like a documentary, an exhibit design, survival guide. That's kind of interesting. So I'm going to roll with this one. So love the survival guide. Can you create a self-evaluation for this? And so as far as the assignment goes, I went from having like just a piece of text to, or a quiz or a test, to a new project, which is my survival guide, down here to a student self-evaluation tool. I mean, you can make your own rubric or whatever the case might be. But very quickly, we've taken something old and kind of stale and just turned it into something brand new. And here it gives us, 3 parts. We can continue to have the conversation with this AI to revise, what this either project. So going back up above, we could revise the sort of boundaries of the project, or we could even revise this rubric, this evaluation tool. And so going back to our brainstorm here, we were trying to think of something where we were coming up with something new based on something old, focused on creativity and sort of, more dynamic lesson plan than what existed before. Certainly, we could encourage more collaboration through that process if we wanted to. But it's a way for us to very quickly, like I said, go from something old and create something brand new. Just kind of moving on here, and I won't spend super long in each one of these because there was something I wanted to try to squeeze in towards the end of the session today, maybe a new tool for you. That's something that you may not have seen before. It came out kind of recently, though. I know a couple people in the chat mentioned it. Thinking about lesson plans. So one of the things that when you're working with AI that's really important is starting with like a very clear objective. A lot of times I've seen some of my staff, just as an example, they start having a conversation with AI. And if we go back to our LLM here, so I'll just start a new one. They say, make me a lesson plan on, let's say, cell structure. And that was it. This is called one-shot prompting. One-shot prompting is just kind of throwing something at the AI, letting it come up with best guess. And as we talked about before, one of the things that it's really important to know is that AI, what it's doing is predicting what it thinks I want to hear. It's really trying to please us with a response. And so I give it a, very vague, very wide open problem, and it gives me a very vague, wide open solution. So 3 different grade levels. And if you've taught middle school or high school, you know the difference between a 13-year-old and perhaps a 15 to 16-year-old. It's pretty much a world of difference. And so what's really important is that when we're starting with creating like a lesson plan or an experience of some sort, that we have a clear objective. And so as we saw, I just kind of got something that, it picked out some objectives, and maybe like they're close, but we might not do all of these things or cover all these things in the class, or I might be interested in something very specific. So like, let's go with, let's start with the main structure. So I'm gonna take that. I really want to focus on this one. This is my objective. And so going back to some of the tips that are here, again, we want to be specific about the outcomes we want. So what do we want the students doing? And again, you might have a variety of different types of things that you want the students to be doing. Again, I recommend trying to think about active learning, things where the students are being hands-on, where they're able to communicate, where they're able to create new things, produce new stuff. Especially creating things really helps cement learning. And so it gives you a couple of examples of what that might look like. And then, of course, customized to your students' needs. So as I'm working through this prompt, I've identified the objective. Maybe we want students to, I want them to be active, but I want them to create something. So I'm just going to say, my goal is for students to create a video documentary. So they're going to actually produce something here, and I want to be very clear about also, what types of strengths they have. And so maybe my class needs a very specific reading level. So I'm going to be very specific with that grade. So we'll talk about students. Students are reading at an 8th grade level. Please accommodate. Okay. So we'll work with that. And it's going to even, in the case of ChatGPT, it is going to do, it will commit some things to memory as well. So now we have a much more focused lesson plan, much more clear objectives that align to what we need. It gives me a list of materials, and then it begins with the lesson outline. And so just kind of looking at the lesson planning process, going back to what I was saying before, the more context we can provide it, the more clear I can be about the task at hand, the better the result is that I get. So you can see some sample prompts that are down here. You feel free to you're welcome to use them, remix them however you'd like. Talking about content creation, I won't spend much time here working on anything specific to this, but in terms of content creation, I emphasized this before, think beyond the traditional quizzes. One of the nice things about pretty much any free version now, whether using ChatGPT free version, which is still using the 4.0 model, if you're using Claude, which I don't know if they have free available currently. I know that they didn't for a long time. If you're using Google Gemini, you are able to add things like PDFs into your conversations. So definitely recommend trying out having a quiz or a test that's, a PDF that you might have used before. Just dump it in and to see what happens when you start talking with the AI about ways that you can either do something different. So I can take this quiz and turn it into a new project, or perhaps you could find new ways of working towards that quiz if it's something that you have to incorporate. All sorts of different tasks. If you're able to diversify the assessment, you can ask it to create new versions of it. And then, of course, interactive learning where possible. Again, the AI can help you come up with ideas for that. Down here, you can see some sample prompts, which include, again, topic, objectives, grade level, that type of thing that helps sort of focus the AI in creating a solution that best fits your needs. And the last one I wanted to incorporate here was we were talking about personalizing learning paths and resources. So I think there's a couple of tools that are already out there. So I know I saw EduAid. I think that has some tools in it before. EduAid is like a teacher-focused AI model. I've seen one that's Diffit, it's called. That's a tool that differentiates assignments. So you add text or a PDF into the AI model, and it produces a differentiated version of that particular assignment. So there are some things out there like that, and that can be helpful, particularly if you're thinking like special ed, where your students might have specific needs that require a certain reading level. Perhaps it requires you to have certain accommodations for an assessment or a quiz. So by adding those types of resources into the AI, I'm able to come up with another version of an assignment that's going to be tailored based on the student's needs. The one thing that I would also add to, so I'm skipping down to mastery. So when you're talking about AI, one thing that I found really helpful is helping or using AI to help either yourself or your learners create kind of like learning paths. So if I go back to ChatGPT over here, I'm going to start a new chat. One of the things, and you could probably think of a few different words to do this, like either a mind map, a knowledge graph, but you can use these AI models to help create sort of a roadmap or a path to go from learning something new to mastery. So I'm going to talk about, so I want to learn. So I was a history teacher. So I picked out a history before. I'll kind of stick with that thread. I want to learn about, let's say, we'll say Civil War Reconstruction. Create a custom learning path or knowledge graph based on the topic. And I'm just gonna say I know nothing about the Civil War. Okay. So we could probably give it a lot more context of what to like what we're trying to get to, but we'll just start with that and see what it comes up with. So when it comes to creating these like learning paths, I found uh, different AI models really useful to help sort of understand because again, they're computers. So one of their strengths is to be very logical, sequential. Now that doesn't mean you won't get hallucinations as you go, but it can be a really quick and effective way to sort of look at the broad scope or scale of the prerequisites required to learn about a specific topic. So in our case, we had Civil War reconstruction. So here it gives us multiple stages. So stage one, talk about some of the key events. End of Civil War. Here are some resources. I don't know if they're any good. Certainly have to do some homework or some research on that before I would go wholesale and kind of use them. Although I do like Crash Course, they have great series. Here's stage two, talks about some overview items, key figures, again more learning resources, and then down here reconstruction. And there's stage four, stage five. Oh, this is pretty extensive. Awesome. They even give like a final activity. So the one thing that I find kind of useful here is being able to see kind of sequentially like what sort of prerequisites are important for understanding the next step. And you could say, as an example, so I have struggling learners who may need resources written at a, let's say, 7th grade level. Can you revise? So it'd be helpful if I spelled correctly. Oh, is it thinking or no? It's not thinking. All right, we'll try again. Looks like a conversation's not happening. All right, so we got shut down, but you get the idea. So I won't belabor it anymore. But essentially, one of the things, so going back to the tips for personalization, is you can think of it through a couple of dimensions. One is like we can use AI to differentiate, from one lesson to the next, or one assessment to the next. We can do things like creating knowledge graphs. We can work with students to produce pathways for learning. And the really cool part I think about that one is that this is something you could do with students. So as you're having a conference with the student and they're kind of choosing personal pathways to learn something, whether it's through like a project that they're working on in class, or perhaps they have time to sort of self-select some learning paths, you can use AI very quickly to help kind of produce a learning direction for them by creating kind of like this knowledge graph. Here you can see some examples of sample prompts that you might use. But I wanted to show that use case. I think that one's pretty neat, especially because you can do it in conjunction with students, give them some ownership over that learning process. All right. So I think we got a few more minutes here. With that, and not really shifting gears, but a tool that I just came across the last couple days here, I want to share this with you all. So I'm going to drop the link into the chat. And I don't know if everyone can get to this yet. It might depend on if you're using a school account or a personal account. So Google has long hinted at this notebook LM tool. So I dropped the link into your chat. And it has a lot of functions that you might find similar to ChatGPT. So it's not like totally new. But I think they're making a very deliberate play for education. And so I wanted to give you in this webinar just a set of tools that you could use using or I guess strategies, I should say, strategies that you could use with basic tools like a ChatGPT or Gemini. And I also want to provide something maybe that's a little bit newer. And so this Notebooks LM is an experimental product by Google. now we are, as a Google district, we are allowing our teachers to get access to like the early experimental products. If you have a personal Gmail account, I think you can get to this. But in some cases, if your school manages your Google account, they may limit you from seeing experimental tools. So if you can't get to it, that might be why. But I just started playing around with this today, actually, a little bit. And so you can see my test. Notebook LM is basically like a repository. So if I go ahead and open this new notebook, you can see I can upload all kinds of resources to it. So if I'm a teacher, I might upload, say, some curriculum that I have, maybe some tests that I have previously, maybe important websites that I'm using for a particular unit or a lesson. And so what it does, it begins to aggregate all those resources into this place here. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go back to one that I was working on today. So this is my test one. And I uploaded a bunch of professional development materials, that we had produced, or I had produced with our teachers. And you can see a lot of these are like my school district based resources. In the sources, you can add additional ones. So I could add Google Docs, so it pulls right from my drive. Over here, website. So I'm going to add a new website. I don't want to add the one I had before, but you can just paste the URL. So it's nothing special. You can paste text, or you can choose a file, which allows you to upload PDFs or Markdown. So once you have this repository, this is the part that I thought was super cool. They give you what's called a note guide. So it's down here. And they give you like ideas for how to process this information. So what it does is Google Gemini will take all of this data, and it will allow me to produce like an FAQ, a study guide, a timeline, a briefing doc. I can even produce something unique. So what I asked it before was, all right, let me say, create for me a memo that outlines our future AI strategy based on the steps we've taken already. Okay, so it's going to look at all of the documents I gave it, and it's going to then use sort of Gemini behind the scenes to produce what it thinks is a good strategy for AI in our school, based on the things that we've done already. Now, Claire had asked about, is there something else we can use besides Google in your situation? So you can do this with especially with Claude. I know Claude has artifacts, which is kind of the same thing. It like creates a folder worth of resources. Essentially, you could do the same in ChatGPT by uploading a lot of these docs, though I find this like layout to be far more user-friendly. And so here you can see this AI memo strategy, and it pulls based on all the things that I have in my data set here. It even references where it came from, which is pretty cool. So it gives me a lot of information there. And if I like this, I'm just going to save it as a note. And you'll see it gets kind of saved. So these are all the things that were produced based on this data set. And the one that like blew my mind was this one. You can actually create like a audio overview of all the resources that were dumped into here. So I think I'm sharing my sound. Let me make sure. Okay. So I'm gonna go. Hopefully you guys can hear this.
No, I can't hear anything.
Oh, you can't? Oh, that's lame. Let me try one more time. I'm going to present one more time. Window to share. Oh, share tab. Okay, gotcha. I hear you, Google Meet. Okay, so here we go. So the way this works is it takes all of the data that's, again, dumped into this, this notebook, and it actually produces like a 2-person podcast. These are totally AI generated. So I'll play a minute here.
Shop slides, some intriguing expert panel prep materials, and even a whole report from the U.S. Department of Education. You really went all out.
Well, it seems like you're gearing up for a deep dive on this topic, and honestly, it's perfect timing because AI in education is the hot topic right now.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
And with all the excitement, and let's be honest, a little bit of anxiety too surrounding AI, it's easy to feel a bit lost at sea. So our mission today is to cut.
So that was like pretty wild. And I listened to about 9 minutes of this. It gives all sorts of like kind of insights from the data that it was provided. And I was just thinking, like, as a teacher, the voices are like silky smooth. It does sound like NPR. So the one thing that I thought was super useful was, like, you put a bunch of data together, from my unit or my lesson, and I'm able to create this, like, maybe like audio, like podcast type thing, which I could share with students. I don't know how many students listen to podcasts, but like, it's just another tool that you can use to, engage your students in some different ways. And I'm also thinking, like, if students were to use this, like, how cool would that be, where they have sort of a data repository of resources that they've gathered, they've produced, and like they're able to create things like podcasts as like a result of like the work that they've created. So super interesting. Yeah, so I wanted to share that. I think this is like relatively new in terms of availability, yeah, it's a really neat tool, and I think you're going to see a lot more sort of innovation on this for teachers. So with that, just really quick to kind of bring it home. Again, thanks for bearing with me as I sort of pivot a bit. Wanted to include that since it was new. Just some last minute things to think about. When AI, as far as like considerations, so these are sort of things to think about when you're using AI. When should you not be using this? If you have things that are specific to student data, like specific assignments where there's grades involved, in terms of like putting numerical like student grades into a system, maybe something you want to avoid, particularly putting student names in places, things that might be personally identifiable information. We don't want to put that stuff into these AI models. The other thing you got to think about is ethical concerns. Certainly AI has some bias, and it's really important for students to be involved in terms of the oversight. Kind of going back to that point that I led off with before, and that is that, AI is really useful, but at this point, we're certainly not talking about replacing teachers with AI. AI is a really important tool that can enhance teacher flexibility and teacher capability. It's really meant to augment our experience. And so hopefully today will, again, help you augment your experience as an educator in the classroom or as a professional development leader, whatever the case might be. And so with that, just to kind of close out here, these are some of the big takeaways from today. Hopefully they came across very clearly for you. I feel like kind of jumped around a little bit there, but really effective prompting can help unlock AI's potential. And again, AI is not meant to replace teachers, but enhance them. And last but not least, AI can really support more effective learning outcomes and learning experiences. Like I said, it's really helpful to think about ways that we can use this technology to really enhance what we do, going beyond just copying the worksheets, copying the tests, or creating new tests. Like, how can we use it to really enhance or encourage hands-on learning for our students? So again, hopefully today you got some strategies, some tools, some things that you can walk away with and take back to your practice right away.